they're talking about things like central bank digital currencies, whereby the central banks start to centrally control everything. That would be a complete and utter disaster.
Why?
Because everybody becomes a slave.
Healthcare is a space I've been involved in for 20 years. The social care workers, 1 in 5 would live in poverty.
Pays incredibly low.
It's incredibly low, and it gives you that example. 13% of nurses that qualify drop out.
And what I realised is money, we've got to cause this flow. I think and flow, money is a means of exchange, and it's a means of providing everybody with their needs, but it's got to flow. The trouble with interest is it causes money to stop flowing because you take it out of the system and you put it somewhere where it stagnates.
Right.
And it's not flowing.
The Manna Journey is the catalyst for change in our world. It's a consistent source of truth for the next generation and current leaders. Our mission is to change the world by reframing our current governance, by using ancient wisdom to solve modern problems, and by shaping innovative new businesses to have a culture of pursuit of purpose.
This is an episode of the Manna Journey created by Phillip Ullmann. The Manna Journey is a whole new concept in economics, in business and in governance, where we take the wisdom of the Bible to create innovation in business and indeed then push that through to a change in our society through good governance. Today, I'm going to be talking to Phillip himself and, of course, a great businessman and a friend of ours, I think, Suhail Mirza. So take it away.
So the story of Joseph, as far as I can see, is powerful. And it shows a complete and total misunderstanding of what money is for and how money operates. So in Joseph's original interpretation, there is no money. There is just food being distributed in an equitable way so that everybody, talk your concepts of oneness, everybody in the world gets the food they need.
Extreme famine.
And money doesn't stand in the way. Because you're distributing the result and you're saying what we need is food. Once you confuse the situation and you involve money, which is what happens as a result of Pharaoh saying, I care about my own throne, I'm looking after myself, is what happens with money is it becomes the purpose. And the first thing he does is collect all the money, and then the money accumulates, and then the animals accumulate, and then everyone ends up being a slave.
Yeah.
Which is very, very recognizable. And in terms of the banking system, almost look at Pharaoh as the central bank. WEF are now saying that we have to all accept that we'll have no money, we'll own nothing at all, but we'll have a wonderful, peaceful life.
That's the World Economic Forum.
That's the World Economic Forum, absolutely right. Because they're talking about things like central bank digital currencies, whereby the central banks start to centrally control everything. That would be a complete and utter disaster.
Why?
Because everybody becomes a slave. It's exactly what Pharaoh does. What happens when all the money is owned by the elite? Well, no one has anything I should say, and everything is owned by the 1% or the 0.1%. And so the story that happens after they come out of Egypt, they cross the Red Sea, and then manna comes along. So what I'd like to talk about is develop the ideas of what is the answer that the Manna Journey gives us. And I think there's two aspects to it. The first thing is the daily flow, provide everybody what they need in the day. What that means for me and is this, that everybody has certain needs. So what needs do we have? We need food, basically, or we need air. But fortunately, air is free, unless it's in Switzerland where you have to pay tax. But anyway, but other than Switzerland, air is free, but you have to pay for food. You have to eat food. You have to drink. You need clothing. You need housing. You need a meaningful job. Those needs, the Bible is saying, everybody should make sure God causes it to rain manna everywhere. So there's plenty for everybody. But all we have to do is make sure that we distribute it, a bit like Joseph was saying, to everybody in a way that everybody has what they need. Think about a situation, imagine, both Suhail and I were in recruitment, and I did it even before recruitment when I was in facility services and security. We moved our payroll from a weekly payroll to a monthly payroll, which means people didn't get paid. They would work week one until the end of the first week after the end of the month. That's what we did, because if you focused on cash, you focus on money. It's one of the first things you course 101, cash flow. You actually
That's so
pay
you've got the
people
money
late.
in the company.
You keep it.
Yes.
And you don't go back to weekly. Once you made a transition from a weekly payroll to a monthly, that money is yours.
Yes.
And you've actually taken it. And what happens, unfortunately, is that people live hand to mouth. They haven't got food to put on the table. And I can tell you an example of a story that one of my colleagues experienced. Went to one of the warehouses and asked a young lady what she thought about our company. She said, I love the company, but on a Friday, last Friday, I wasn't paid. I had to wait another week. I didn't have money, so I had no food to put on the table for my kids. My husband couldn't find any overtime, so we sent him out stealing.
Cool.
And that brought it home to me. That shocked me and made me realize that the whole system has lost focus on people, and that you have to pay people on time. And can you imagine the flow? Think about this. I'm just trying to explain a new world where you work today, and this is the biblical model. You pay a person that night for the work. So they work today. Now, if they are selling goods, for example, it's easier because you've got food. People say, I'm not going to give you the food until the money's exchanged. So that automatically causes the flow.
Yes.
But work is harder because at the start of the day, you haven't done the work yet. So you have to do the work. So there has to be an element of credit, but you get paid that night. Think about that, and think about money as a means of exchange. So it's Joseph's idea of distributing. So money is not the end. Money is the flow. I was just talking to Byron earlier. The metaphor, a good one, is blood. And this is in the Talmud. Money is actually called domim, which is blood. So it's about flowing around the system. What does the blood do? It ensures that every organ within the body is provided with what it needs, whether it's oxygen or nutrition. It's provided by the blood flow, and that's the way we have to think about
Why?
it.
But just let me ask you this: why don't businesses pay people on a daily basis? There's no technical impediment.
Nothing.
It's a practice which has been established for a long time, and as Phillip talked about recruitment, there's many other industries. I'll give you another example. Healthcare is a space I've been involved in for 20 years. The latest stats show in social care, people looking after people in their own homes or care homes, the social care workers, 1 in 5 but live in poverty.
Yes.
1 in 5.
The pay's incredibly low.
It's incredibly low, and it gives you that example. Nurses, there are 13% of nurses that qualify and drop out of this profession within 2 years because of the debt they've accumulated being trained. So these are important things that Philip's talking about. Flow of money and access.
But even what Philip's saying, what you've said goes even further, because of course, when Philip describes it, you think of it as doing the right thing by each individual person. But when you're talking about not being able to get nurses because of poverty, it means that it impacts all of us, even those that do have the money.
It goes back to the principle of oneness. It's all connected.
Yes.
And if you have a very small percentage that become plutocrats, huge amounts of money, that's great for them. But actually, they're, in a sense, that they're also damaging their own long-term interests, because you can't have productivity at an optimal level, as Philip's talked about, unless people are feeling that stress of money and how they're going to put food on the table away. And the Islamic perspective absolutely is very adamant about the idea of equitable distribution. It also says that it specifically targets hoarding as a sin, to use that phrase. It's not very popular today, but it is I would say it is actually an affront to an equitable society to hoard whatever it might be. It might be goods, it might be wealth, it might be the food that we had in Pharaoh, because they are abusing power. And it goes back to, what are you using it for? It isn't an end in itself. It's a purpose.
Okay, so this summarizes the Manna story. There's 2 very simple solutions, and they involve understanding money. So the first thing, and what we got to separate, is 2 things which we confuse. We mix up money and lending. And I think Islam's got a lot to say on this as well. But and we get confused. And the starting point is, when you start paying your workers late, it becomes lending. But it shouldn't be. It should be money.
Yes.
And that's what we're saying. And it should be gold linked, not bags of gold, but a ledger linked to amount of gold.
But most people think.
some value or some
Most
value.
people think. I mean, I've thought about this before today. When you talk about quantitative easing, people think their £5 note in their pocket is £5 worth of gold in the Bank of England,
Yes.
and it simply isn't.
And people don't get it. And what we have to start is a very simple conversation across faiths, across people and non-faith, is explaining these very simple things. It's not money which is in a safety deposit box, which is yours. The Bible is crystal clear. When I put money in the bank have to look after it. They've got to protect it from me, and they can't lend it even. So even the concept of fractional reserve banking, all of that is out, because we have to separate the concept of money, which is gold, which is physical linked asset, and lending, which is separate. And these things we merge, and we have to start to separate those ideas.
Do you mind if I ask how Sharia banking actually works in practice? Because I think a lot of us are not familiar with it.
Yeah, so if we go back to the core principle about oneness, we're holding everything on trust.
Yeah.
Prosperity and business is good. It's not. We're not talking about a communist system here.
No,
where everyone is
of
going to
course
be
we're
the
not.
same. We're talking about wealth creation being extremely positive. Sharia or sacred law comes from the word. It means a path. It's a guidance.
Yes.
So it's meant to have certain principles. So the purpose of sacred law is to protect the religion, protect health, protect the society, all of these things. So those are the background. In terms of
It's kind of a wider societal benefit. It's the starting point.
anything that is done which does not conform to those principles is not permissible.
Okay.
So there's a whole category of what's permissible and what's prohibited. So we have to keep that bearing in mind. So in business, in terms of banking, etc., that you can have it. What's the prohibition is really against excess. The word riba, which is the interest in the Quran talks, its literal translation is excess, extreme amounts of interest. And banking and investment is meant to be risk sharing. That's the important point. So when I invest money with you, and there's many instruments with it. If you lose money or the business isn't doing well, I feel that pain as well. Whereas if I just lend you the money and you're paying me irrespective of your performance, I'm not.
Actually, can I just start to perhaps give a framework for understanding? We have the same issue with interest. Interest is prohibited, but risk sharing is not. We're talking the same language, but it's bigger than that. And what I realised is money. We've got to cause this flow. I think and flow. Money is a means of exchange, and it's a means of providing everybody with their needs. But it's got to flow. The trouble with interest is it causes money to stop flowing, because you take it out of the system and you put it somewhere where it stagnates,
Right.
and it's not flowing.
Yep.
And then people can't put food on the table and haven't got meaningful jobs. So we have to start to cause it to flow. Therefore, interest prohibits the flow. Risk sharing doesn't. And,
Not at all.
But when you start having incentives to take money that's needed to flow out of the system, or to produce huge quantities of money that has no purpose other than to line the pockets of the wealthy, then you're losing focus on the flow, because it doesn't flow. Because once you've got 100 billion, that's not going to flow. It's going to sit in a yacht somewhere.
If the money is just created, as you just said, at the press of a button, and it's not connected to anything of value or real, then it becomes a casino. Like we had off-balance sheet transactions which brought the investment banks down. That's exactly what happened at Lehman, etc. So
But it's just it feels like such a small difference, but it has such a huge impact to say risk sharing rather than just interest for interest's sake. But actually, you can see how the money would flow much more properly.
Correct, because what the purpose
Readily,
the purpose is the oneness that Suhail talks about, which means that everybody has to have their needs met. We're not saying that people should not be successful and have more resources, but they have to use those resources to be a source of blessing for the world.
that's true. And a couple of quick points on that was just to complete the Islamic picture you asked earlier around taxation. We talked about there is a principle in Islamic doctrine which is called zakat, which is loosely translated means mostly translates charity, but that is a tax on people's net worth, 2.5%, and that's the purpose of that is to purify the money that you're earning. So the idea it's a simple principle. I have this money, I'm doing this money, and it's a wider good. And if you go back to the Genesis story, which I think is very beautiful, when they decided to instigate this protection of everybody when the family was going to come, which Joseph was blessed to be able to interpret. The predicate goes back again. We need to appoint someone who has wisdom and understanding. That's the bit that we have to. What does that wisdom mean? Those broader principles and the wider benefits.
What we have to be careful of, if you look carefully in the Bible, there's no reference to taxation as it happens. It's making people trustees. So what happens is each one of us becomes both a we and an I. So you don't have a centralized state where you take money away from people and it's disconnected from the local town, from the local community. Instead, each one of us is effectively a miniature version of the state.